Pretty good.
It's good to see it. It's been a while since I've seen you in person. So, you had a busy day.
Yeah.
Couple closings or?
One closing today, one that I'm preparing for Friday. Getting ready for a photo shoot tomorrow with the Johnstown magazine.
Nice.
Doing a lot of different things today.
But you have Little League this afternoon?
Yes, coaching Little League baseball.
So obviously when I think of you as a realtor, right?
Yeah.
But I know you're involved with quite a bit more, including some giving back to the community. So yeah, go over what all your...
So in terms of real estate, I'm in our Cambria-Somerset Association of Realtors. I sit on that board of directors. I'm also in a committee for the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. Then here locally, I'm involved with the Community Action Partnership of Cambria County as the vice president of that board of directors. The YMCA downtown here in Kernville, I'm on their board of directors. I also coach a Greater Johnstown Youth League Little League baseball team. So
that's awesome.
And I'm forgetting one, the Victim Services Advisory Board that just started this year here in Cambria County. I'm on that too. So.
Yeah, and you're not
time for it all.
You're not old. I think when people hear about people being on boards, in real estate, it's kind of all ages I've noticed, but for some of that stuff.
Oh, I'm usually the youngest one in the room.
Yeah, but that just speaks to your character and
it's fun.
Yeah,
honestly,
to your desire to give back.
A fresh perspective. But I learn a lot of things from people who have sat on boards for years and they've been involved in different organizations, so it kind of elevates me and ages me mentally quicker than I would be without that experience.
You're like an old soul.
Trying to
very mature.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to talk mostly about inspections, but the whole purpose of these, and you're lucky number one. So I've had several people reply and say, yeah, I'd love to sit down and talk, but you're actually the first one I've scheduled with, so I'm excited. But we're going to be talking about inspections, but if the conversation just veers off course a little bit here and there, no big deal. The idea is, your colleagues, mine, to all benefit, from our discussion, and just to be real, So
I have the same goal here.
Yeah. So I have a list of questions here that I'll ask, but if we move to other topics, no big deal. Okay. So first question is, for you as an agent, what are the most important characteristics you feel a good inspector should have? One that you'd really like working with?
So there were three that I had thought of. The first one is knowledge, and obviously you guys have to go through becoming certified to be inspectors that are qualified enough to go into these homes that our clients can call and that we can call to ask for these various inspections. But I don't just mean about the ins and outs of a house or radon testing or wood destroying insects. I want you to be knowledgeable about your area as well, because one of the things that you've specifically done that I really like is explain to people at inspections, hey, this is just a certain feature or function of the house that's specific to the Johnstown area and when it was built. I genuinely appreciate that so much, because where some inspectors would just say, oh yeah, it's an old house, this is just what it is, you give them a little more background detail, and that does alleviate some of their fears and concerns depending on what the situation is.
Well, one thing I don't like is that our job is literally to be the bearer of bad news. But I also don't like to just dwell on all the bad, on defects, So we spend a lot of time going over with clients the nice features we're seeing too. But yeah, just a couple of examples of what you're talking about. So our area has some unique things like what we call minor showers and basements and Pittsburgh toilets and basements, right? So I'll take a second and tell a client, hey, this is something neat about your old home. The reason the shower's here is because we have a lot of mining around the area, and miners used to get home, they'd be filthy, and their wife would have a change of clothes downstairs, so they go, there's always a basement entry at those houses. They go right downstairs when they got home, rinse off, change, go up, eat dinner, Those are just cool little facts to know when you buy an old house, because a new home, it might have a finished nice basement with a full-on bathroom.
It doesn't have the same character to it.
It doesn't. It's not a minor shower like an old Pittsburgh toilet, and you just don't have it in most parts of the country. So anyway, but you had a couple other.
The next one is empathy. because as you know, buyers, when they go to their home inspection, they're extremely emotional. Some of them can be a little bit high strung because they're very nervous about what's going to come up. They are praying and crossing their fingers that nothing major comes up. And in their mind, major is, oh, the roof's only going to last 6 months, or I need to go get a new boiler. But every little thing that's noted in those reports, it can freak out the buyer. So just being empathetic to how they're feeling as well, because that's half the time we describe ourselves as realtors and therapists, because we are always trying to calm our clients down on both sides of the table. So being able to do that at an inspection as well, while you're giving them the factual information that they are paying you to give them, but also taking their feelings into consideration, that's important to us as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we try and really go out of our way in that regard, to set people at ease. So we don't sugarcoat deficiencies, we find. I mean, sometimes this is what it is, and facts are facts. But we're very careful to let someone know, like, hey, this is a potentially big problem, but it's easily fixed. Or, a lot of things are, really. And sometimes inexpensively fixed. So it might be a major safety hazard, for example, like no smoke or carbon monoxide detectors in a home, but not that hard to go out.
You can go and install those pretty easily.
And it's a DIY job. If you're even a tiny bit handy, you can do that. So, and realtors, I always hope that agents understand when we put every little thing on the report, it's not because we're trying to be alarmist or scare people. We have that conversation, whether it's in person near the end of their inspection, or if not, we call them, and we'll let them know, like, hey, this whole last section of your report that's text only, like, that's just put it on a future to-do list, get to it when you can type stuff. And even then, a lot of it isn't necessarily defects. It might be like we're presenting a good, better, best, right? Like what you have right now is acceptable, but this is what's ideal. It's just something minor, like upgrading their dryer vent. No one, but there are people, to your point, who they see all those little things, and then in their mind, if they're a perfectionist, they want the home to be perfect.
So they're not looking at the specific details, they're looking at the page count. The
Yeah.
longer it gets, the more they freak out, and even though half of it's not even that bad.
Yeah, and that's, and I'm sure most other inspectors out there have really worked hard over the years to try and just parse down like our report length. So I actually just here lately we've sort of condensed our comments from being full on paragraphs, with a ton of detail, down to bullet points. Like, here's the issue, here's what it could lead to. And then, it's much, much shorter and more concise. And we might link them to an article for more detailed info, but, it's just, again, it's not quite as alarmist. So,
and another thing I just thought of, actually, from our Luther Street client that we had earlier this year, her and her husband raved about how you were willing to sit on the phone with them and talk about all the different parts of the report. And I've known you as long as I've been doing this job. I know that that's just a staple for who you are. You will get on the phone with someone and talk to them about any questions they have with the report. Some other inspectors that, have been referred to by a friend of my client, or whatever the case may be, a relative, they're not always willing to do that. But I definitely, Luther Street sticks out to me because I think that made them feel a lot better, because it was a pretty decent report. But I told them as I was going through the house, hey, this home inspection probably isn't going to be the most kind, so just be prepared for that.
Sometimes I've literally had conversations beyond midnight with clients.
I know, we've had some of those deals.
It's like if they need to talk then, and and I'm free, then I'll just stay up and I'll talk with them whenever they need to.
That willingness, it really does help, and it makes our job easier.
Well, and again, the job isn't done until it's done. Even for you guys, you might have the house might close. Then a couple months later, maybe something's held back in escrow, work still has to be done. And, last time I bought the house myself, I worked with an agent and he told me the same thing. We had an issue come up a few months later, and I said, I'm sorry to bug you so far after the fact. And he goes, hey, it's not over till it's over. So I tell people, call us 5 years from now if you need, questions answered or anything. Okay, perfect. So, how important do you feel, honestly, I mean, whatever your honest answer is to this, totally fine, but how important do you feel inspections, environmental testing, everything we do is in particular relative to other things in the real estate transaction?
Inspections are, they're at an equal balance on the scale for me with a mortgage contingency. And you know, there's people who buy in cash, but they're still going to do the inspection. So then the inspection comes higher. If there's both, they're about even, because any one of those things could make or break a deal and give your buyer or seller leverage in negotiating, the ability to completely possibly blow up a transaction. But if there's something really wrong with the house that comes up in an inspection report, I tell my buyers all the time, I would rather you spend the $350, $450, $500, whatever the cost is for the inspection, than spend $150,000 on this house, $200,000 on this house, and now you're inheriting this giant financial money pit.
Yeah.
I think that they're incredibly important, and I know that recently, over the last couple of years, especially with all the crazy bidding wars, people are starting to waive them, and we're getting away from being able to ask for inspections in like a multiple offer situation. I'll never tell my buyers not to do it if they're not comfortable with it. I will tell them that sometimes a seller looks at it as a negative, but it's an important thing to have on both ends. I just went through it with one of my sellers where I told her, because our buyer had an inspection contingency. Best case scenario, they don't ask for anything. Worst case scenario, they walk, but at least we know what the deficiencies of your house are. So we can maybe put together a plan to put in a little more work to correct those and get you the type of offer that you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was another question I had on here. You know, you probably know. So lately, over the past few years or so, basically post-COVID, it seems. I mean, the market's gone crazy, and I get it. Like, I'll be the first to admit, if I were a realtor and working with a client who, you know, maybe a couple, and they're looking at a $250,000, $300,000 house, and you know there are 10 offers the day it's listed or within a few days. I mean, yeah, like realistically, what are the chances you're going to get that offer accepted? If you're electing all this stuff,
it's got to be the highest and best terms and price. So
yeah, it's like you have to be careful, always walk that fine line of liability. So you know, I'm sure a lot of agents for a while now have been saying things like, hey, I would never advise you to waive an inspection, but if you don't, your chances of getting your offer accepted.
We still have to keep that honesty with you, where I'll usually, as I'm standing in the house or on the phone with my buyers specifically, and we're talking about, you know, offer terms, and that section of the conversation comes up, I'll put them in the driver's seat of the seller. Say it's your home, this situation, this many offers on your house. What offer would you want to take the most?
Are most people honest and realistic?
Yeah, they're honest, and they go, well, I want the one with the least amount of red tape. And I said, exactly. But would you blame any of your buyers if they didn't feel comfortable not having a home inspection done? You can't really blame them for that.
No, I mean, they might lose out on the house.
Yeah.
But, you know, I guess my thought on this, because we've done a number of inspections on multiple houses for the same client, because, you know, maybe they're really particular.
Yeah.
Or, you know, maybe a house that they like better came up on the market. I mean, that kind of thing happens too. Of course, there are contractual obligations. But yeah, I get it. I mean, the market does dictate a lot.
It's made it hard to just automatically know you're going to be able to do an inspection. And I've had really, I'll say, uncomfortable conversations with clients where I tell them, look, there's 7, 8 offers on this house. Any contingencies you have are going to be looked at as a detriment. And that's not just an inspection, though. It's if you have a mortgage contingency and you're not putting down enough money to get an appraisal waiver, or if there's a cash offer that you're competing against, seller's probably going to take one of those other ones too, because it's the least amount of red tape. It's not just the inspections, but that's usually where most of them go.
It's not just because, just so people watching understand, every realtor is going to know this, of course, but it's not just an issue for the sellers, because the inspection might bring up issues that have to be repaired or paid for, or, you know, the credit given, whatever. If that buyer walks because of that, and the house stays on the market. Now those sellers are legally required to disclose anything more major from our report with any new potential buyers. So it keeps people honest, but it is a gamble. Like so.
And it's all about how you present that information, like with anything.
Yeah.
Explain to your seller it's not a bad thing, it's just information, that it's better that we know it than having it in the dark.
Mm-hmm. So what are some of your least favorite things about inspections? Because there are probably several.
I've had some doomsday explainers where they just make everything sound like the sky is falling. And I've stood there and I'm not going to call them out because they're doing their job and I'm just there as support from my buyer or an observer. But I'm standing there and I'm thinking, sweating in my head, oh my God, this could not be a worse explanation of what's going on.
Yeah, making comments like, there's older knob and tube, this whole house has to be rewired, or you'd be an idiot to buy this home, things like that. I mean, I would like to think that my fellow inspector colleagues, aren't doing that, but I know it's common. Unfortunately, it's much more commonplace than I wish it was. So again, we don't sugarcoat, but I think it's important for people who do what I do to know how to effectively communicate. So, like, if you were to ask me, hey, Steve, as an inspector, what do you think is the single most important skill? I actually wouldn't say it's knowledge about construction, but that's obviously hugely important. But if I had to boil it down to only one trait, it would be the ability to communicate properly and empathetically, and in a non-alarmist way, like you were talking about. But anything else?
No, that's really it. I mean, everything else, just through years of doing this, I understand that there's a purpose for everything else, but the alarming description of things, it really freaks some people out on both ends of it.
You may not remember this, but few years back, you and I worked on one together. It was I won't mention any names or anything, but we went back out to the property together. So, but with this one, we were kind of having to dig deep through the report, exactly what we reported on, and you did bring up something there that I thought was a reasonable point. You said, I don't like how sometimes in the reports it'll say further evaluation, like, to have another specialist contractor come out, and we try and avoid doing that as much as we possibly can, but sometimes...
I understand why you have to do it though, so it's all about how you explain it, because if you're not going to be the contractor going up there working on the roof and giving a detailed lifespan of it, you have to cover your bases while also trying to give them as much detailed information as possible. Or something with, in our area especially, water infiltration in the basement, because you know as well as I do. Well, like 95% of the houses here run a dehumidifier year round, have some sort of dampness in the basement when it rains a lot. I see it in every seller's disclosure.
Yeah, maybe it's the only thing. Sometimes there's a whole litany of problems, but nobody can deny, the basement.
There's always going to be something. But then when a client comes back and complains, well, why didn't they give me more detail on this? I said, they can't, They're not the one that's going to go in and do all this work the same way that I can't give you this crazy amount of detail that you're asking for. But what we can do is try and get your inspection done early within your time frame, your window for your contingency period, go over the report, and then maybe we call in a contractor. Which one of the things that I've done with you and other inspectors is, hey, do you know someone who's licensed to handle waterproofing a basement or evaluations on roofs, things like that?
We send every single client, even if they just order a pest inspection or a thermal scan, every single client gets an automated email with a list of local contractors that I've created and I keep updated. Reputable people for our area for everything you can think of. So
as you get more seasoned in real estate, like you'll find your electricians and your plumbers and your general handymen that will always pick up the phone for you. But a new agent shouldn't be afraid to go ask an inspector, hey, do you know someone that could address section 5.3.1 of the report?
Yeah.
It's not going to hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I think every agent figures that out before long. Like, I need to have a team of contractors at my disposal. And I say a team because, for you guys, Us, appraisers that you're used to dealing with, lenders, loan officers, insurance agents. I mean, you have really a team of people, and you're all working together. We all are, but you're like front and center in the transaction and first line with the client. You know, like their main representative. So. Anyway, I wanted to share real quick is I use this analogy with every single client. When I'm going over the report, I tell them, you know, like page 3 is general information. This goes over what a home inspection is and isn't. And the analogy I always give, because everybody gets this, is we're like the primary care doctor of our world. Mm-hmm. And then the electrician, the plumber, the HVAC tech, the roofer, who are, you know, those guys are like the specialists. They're like the cardiologist, the orthopedic surgeon. So just like a PCP, we have to know a lot about everything. Mm-hmm. But just like your primary care doc isn't going to do your spine surgery or your heart cath, you know, like we're not going to diagnose complex, you know, issues we find. We're not going to get invasive, tear things apart. You know, we have to inspect the whole property in a limited time, in and out, top to bottom. So, you know, like if we see corrosion, for example, in a furnace, we don't know if maybe the heat exchanger, which is really the heart and soul of the system, might be corroded or compromised, cracked, leaking, CO, you know, that kind of thing. So we might know that we recommend more invasive evaluation or further evaluation by a qualified HVAC tech or also a plumber for boiler, you know, whatever it may be. But we try and avoid recommending all of the further evaluation whenever we can, because we want people to think like, well, why did I pay you to go out and do this inspection if you're just going to be referring me to other people, you know? And in most cases, it's not really much of a necessity anyway, unless it's one more major defect, you know, something more
huge,
more costly or more of a threat. So we just, you know, briefly brought up a not so great past story, but what's your favorite, if you could think of an inspection related story, is anything that's come up, what?
I would probably say, it was an inspector, I'm not going to name him, but there was a client that when I showed them the house, they were convinced that the roof, the shingles were starting to cave in a little bit, so that the general structure and framing of the roof was caving in. We go into the attic, we look, we can't really tell, but he is so, he is so convinced the roof's caving in and sagging, and I'm just not seeing it.
The inspector or the client?
No, the client.
Okay.
The wife's not seeing it, so we get the deal put together, do a home inspection. I go there just because I'm super curious about what the inspector is going to say about the roof. I give him a heads up that this is what the client had been talking about as we were walking through the house. As soon as the client gets there, it's the first thing he wants him to go look at. Don't even tell me where the shutoffs are. I don't care about any of that. Don't care about the driveway. Tell me about this roof. He goes in, and in the most subtle but also professional way, tells him that there's absolutely nothing wrong with this roof. There's no granular loss. There's no weird slopage to it. It was probably just something going on with his eyes that day, because he even brought the level up there to just try and verify everything about that roof possible. I'm sitting in the background just kind of chuckling, because that man made my day so much better because I got a good laugh out of that. And the wife is sitting there laughing with me too. So we all knew that this woman's husband was just being a little too anal about it.
So did the husband end up?
He did end up buying the house, yeah.
Well, I was going to ask if he ended up agreeing with the inspector.
He did, yeah. He wouldn't listen to me, but he'll listen to the inspector. And I'm okay with that as long as you'll listen to someone who's telling you the correct details.
Because there are some people who, even though they know that we're experts in our field, they don't want to listen. Like, you know, they're just convinced. Or, you know, their dad or their granddad or somebody.
They've seen HGTV or $1 Million listing and they think they can do what we do.
Yeah, exactly. That's funny. I know a lot of agents, not too many, but a handful who, you know, have started out and not done so well. And they've actually said, I thought it was going to be like what I saw on HGTV or TLC, you know? So, okay, well, moving on. So, what have you learned from your experience with inspections over the years that you feel has made you a better, more confident agent?
It's the ability to handle a buyer's reply to inspection, which I know we're going to talk about in a little bit, but handling those conversations on both sides of the transaction. It has forced me to be able to calm down my buyers. It's forced me to learn more about houses than I initially knew, because I would sit down at the beginning and read through the entire report.
Yeah.
You did the inspection for the first house that I ever sold. It was back on Platte Drive, back in, God, I forget what year it was, but back on Platte Drive. And I sat down there, and my big thing was, as a new agent, I need to read all these forms to actually understand what I'm doing and how I'm talking to people.
Yeah.
So
I had to Google some terms and everything.
So I'm sitting there with my broker. We're the only two in the office. It's 9 at night. He's doing paperwork. I'm reading line by line our sales agreement. Then I get your inspection report. I read that thing top to bottom 3 different times, just so I understood what I was communicating to these people. And it helped me learn a couple things for my next few showings as to what I can point out if any of the deficiencies look the same. Now, on the seller side, being able to explain to them where a buyer's coming from when they ask for a credit or a repair, that's incredibly important, because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to keep the deal together. And the negotiation is not just give me what I want right now. It's a little bit of back and forth.
Yeah.
You have to be able to give and receive.
Yeah. So, to your point, I'm in the process now of developing a realtor training program, an online platform for agents to teach them more about everything we do. And it's going to be pretty in depth. So, it's like 30 courses, and we're hoping to get accreditation for the whole program and certification behind it, the whole 9 yards. So I'm letting people know about that, but that'll be hopefully phenomenal for people. But without like an actual training program in place, the only way to really know, and even then, it's just by experience.
Yeah.
You see something enough times on an inspection report or on a report from a test result, and you start to figure out what that means, And it's not like the goal is for you to become a full-fledged inspector.
No.
And of course, you have to be careful as an agent, just like I have to be careful not to step on your toes as a realtor or on the appraiser's toes, even though our jobs overlap in several ways. Everybody has to stay in their lane, but for you to be at a showing and somebody asks you a question and hope that you'll have at least a basic enough understanding of construction, building science to say, this is likely what caused that, or this is what that is. I mean, you'd hope that most agents who have been around the block would be able to answer those pretty basic questions. So, but not with any real level of expertise. So. Okay, well, this kind of goes in tandem with what we were already talking about, but in what ways do you feel inspections have increased and decreased your liability?
So, in a lot of cases, when something is missed, we'll put it in air quotes, missed, and the house is already closed, client has an issue, and they'll say, well, what happened? How come no one knew about this? I know some agents will say, oh, well, you had a home inspection done, so go talk to your home inspector. Mm-hmm. That's how they decrease their liability, but at the same time, they're kind of throwing the inspector under the bus. Now, increased liability in that situation would be, okay, maybe the home inspector missed it as they went through the house one time, but you, Mr. or Mrs. Agent, went through the house to show it maybe once or twice right there. Each buyer in the state of Pennsylvania is entitled to 2 final walkthroughs. So say you use both of those, we're up to 4 times you're in the house. And if you attend the home inspection, it's 5. So compared to the inspector who was there one time, you were there 5. So if you're going to throw them under the bus, you better be able to give a reason as to how you missed that same thing, even though you were in the house just as much as they were.
If it were a glaring problem that was obvious, because who knows? I mean, anything can happen at a house. It's many components. Anytime. I tell people sometimes, it's not likely, but theoretically we could pull out of the driveway and the water heater could crap out.
Your inspection is similar to an appraisal, and the way I explain it to clients is your appraisal is good for the day that it takes place. So is your inspection. Because if, like you said, the water heater just suddenly dies 2 days after the inspection, you weren't aware that it was functioning when you went to test it. You might have noted that it's a little bit older in age and you might want to budget to replace it in the near future. you can't predict exactly when the near future is going to be.
No, and I mean, I tell people all the time they aren't building appliances like they used to.
No.
So, we come across 30 to 40-year-old water heaters that are still going strong and don't have a spot of corrosion on them. And then we come across ones that are 8 weeks old, brand new, and they're leaking heavily, So, we have to tell people, depending on the type of model, 8 to 12 or 10 to 15 years. But I mean, there really is no way of knowing. Those are all averages. You can never predict it for certain. But I mean, if we have it in our report at all, then like even if a client opts for our premium package with the warranty, the protection plans, they have a claim, they're going to call in, and first of all, nothing over 10 years old is covered, but the warranty company is going to ask them right off for an itemized estimate from a licensed contractor and a copy of our report, make sure it wasn't reported. And even if we have on there, like, nearing end of average life expectancy, budget to replace, they're going to go, it's not covered because your inspector noted that. So, but anyway, before I move on to the next question, I did want to point out, because you were talking earlier about me fielding calls at night and things, and I've known you to like go out and mow lawns.
Yeah.
I'm not like trying to commit you to anybody watching this.
Happens. But there was a paint project that needed done on a house for as FHA appraisal. Single mom buying the house. I'm thinking, oh my God, she can't do this on her own, because it was a lot of painting in different areas. I spent 6 hours of my Saturday there that I could have just spent doing anything else, but yeah, I'll help you paint a little bit and make sure that you don't miss any areas so we don't have to come back and do this again.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll help you cut the lawn. Sure, I'll find anything under the sun that you need. Being an agent isn't just opening a door, even though some clients and some agents themselves think that that's all that we should be doing.
Well, you have to, I've learned this, you do have to be careful with some people, because even though we go out of our way to accommodate and to be helpful, stay up late, go the extra mile, sometimes people start to develop a sense of entitlement. Like the contractor list I mentioned, I put together every single client gets. We've had some clients call and they're like, I didn't have such a great experience with so-and-so on your list. I talk to that person and find out maybe there's another side to that story, but they're like, I demand that you take him off the list. And, like, well, I've known this person for years. Like, I need to get a little more info before I would confront him or do that, and then it's like, it becomes an expectation, or, hey, I lost that list. Send it to me again, and please make sure that it's updated. So
if I go out of my way on a deal and I do a really big favor, yes, I'm super happy to do it for you. Don't go telling the entire world, though.
Yeah.
Don't make that the expectation.
Yeah, because you don't want to be out cutting lawns at every house that you list, or that you have under contract with the buyer.
I'm going to do everything within my power to get this deal to go through, but sometimes I'm just not going to have it. I'm human. Can't be Superman every day.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully nobody normally expects us to be. But, okay, so you've spoken about this a bit, but very important. One thing that you do really well, and I've never even witnessed you do it, I just know that you do it well because of the clients that you represent that we work with. I know that you do a really good job setting expectations clearly with them up front. Not all agents do that. I'm sure but there are some realtors who, you would think that they haven't said a single word to the client about what a home inspection is, what the purpose of it is, what it entails. So for example, there are a lot of clients who will ask us things like, now, the seller is required to make every single repair in your report, right? And then I have to tell them, no, I don't want to throw the realtor under the bus, so I'm not going to say, well, your realtor should have done a better job of, So I'll just say, no, they don't have to do anything, but again, it's a fine line we have to walk, because I don't want to give them the impression, like, I don't want to commit or not commit the seller to anything, so I just tell them they don't have to do anything, but you're going to get with your realtor. An important part of his or her job is to do what's called a reply to inspection, and you're going to let them know what issues are a concern, and then you're going to take those to the seller, the listing agent, and you guys will work through all that. And I usually throw in there, like, from the feedback we get, we find that more often than not, an agreement can be reached. You just have to be reasonable.
Yeah.
You know, so
You have to negotiate, and I try and set those expectations at the beginning of every transaction, even sometimes through the very first showing that I'm doing with someone. I just had a young woman call me today, and I've shown her a couple houses, and she thinks she may have found the one, but she just wants to think about it a little more. She was asking how timelines and things worked for offers and inspections, and I gave her every single detail that I could. But I'm doing that just so that she knows what to expect and there aren't too many surprises.
yeah.
The more surprises that you have in the transaction, usually the worse it gets because they're not typically good surprises.
So do you find just in general that it's easier working, at least from an inspection and testing standpoint, with sellers or buyers?
Buyers. I, as a whole, enjoy working with buyers.
You answer that very quickly.
Yes. People will ask me that question all the time, and I started out my career, as you know, on a team, and I was a strictly buyer's agent.
Yep.
Now I work with buyers and sellers, have been for the past several years. I prefer to work with buyers always, whereas some agents, they want to do the seller side because it's a little more work up front, do the listing paperwork and get the photos, but then everyone else goes out and sells the house.
Yeah, you don't have to do all the showings. I mean, there's some buyers agents, as you know, who, I mean, we've heard crazy numbers. Like some of them would tell me like, hey, I've been showing so and so, like showed them 48 houses over the past 2 years.
The most I've shown one singular client who never bought anything, 30 houses.
Yeah, so people need to get that, right? Like, you guys really earn your money. I think some people have this idea that realtors just don't do a whole lot of work and they make all this money. And I mean, I think last I checked, the average nationwide salary for a real estate agent wasn't as high as people would think it.
We're not all rich millionaires.
Yeah, and you have to like really work hard, and you have to wait to get your money too. You have
to, from the time you go under contract to the time you get paid, it can be as long as 45 to 60 days, and anything could happen in that time.
Yeah.
But to re-answer your question here, I prefer buyers because I feel like I have a little bit more control in the transaction. I can help them with the problems that come up in an inspection and talk them through it. Whereas on the seller side, I'm just getting the response, and I don't really get too much say other than a counter offer of sorts.
Yeah.
Or if something comes up in their mortgage and they need help with something or their financing, I'm at least in the know enough that I can help them with that. But I'm a little type A control freak-ish, so I like to be able to have my hands in the pot because I'll do what I can to make it happen.
Well, and at the end of the day, I mean, you have to do what your client asks you to do, right? Like, even if it's completely against everything you're advising, I mean, I guess you could somehow, but if you're like actively in an agreement, working with that client, especially like a listing situation, if you say, hey, I really think you should take this offer. I really don't think this is unreasonable. And they're like, no, I'm not doing that.
All the time. At the end of the day, the line that I keep repeating to everyone is, I'll do whatever you want. I'm just here to guide you with my experience, advice, and opinions.
Yeah.
And I would hope they would take that into consideration, because I haven't been doing this for years and selling houses at the rate that I am without success for no reason. I mean, I'd like to think that I've been a pretty successful agent through the help of inspectors like you and other agents in our area and lenders and title companies. So I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I'm not going to push you to take something that's detrimental to you, but I'm actually trying to give you advice that I think is your best option.
Well, it's a two-way street because, I mean, 95% of our business comes from realtor referrals. You guys go out, show houses, houses are listed, and if inspections are elected, then we get the call. And they're, a lot of people, they're going to take the advice of their agent. So you might hand out a few brochures or give a few names, but if they don't have a realtor, they might Google search it or something, or ask a friend. I mean, but we found if the agent says, I have a lot of respect for so-and-so, or a friend or family member has had a good experience, word of mouth, nothing beats it. So anyway, some of the stuff here that I had planned out, we've already touched on, but you just mentioned this, but I want to give every agent I'm interviewing an opportunity to specifically name drop and give, acknowledgement, just kudos to whoever you might want. It's been a positive influence. It's helped you or that you love working with. So mortgage lenders, insurance agents, settlement agent, whatever.
First and foremost, it would have to be my brokers for my office here, Bill and Sue Lease.
Yeah.
They've given me so many opportunities, but also the freedom to make mistakes. They're not going to let me make big mistakes. They'll pull the reins back before that happens, but they'll let me trip and stumble a little bit as the transaction goes and take a couple lumps here and there just to learn. It's never anything that's going to blow up a deal, but they're not going to coddle and babysit me because they know that I like to be a little more hands-on. I don't enjoy being micromanaged, but they're always there whenever I need them in case something goes wrong. Next would have to be the members of the team that I'm on, the Don Colvin group.
Yeah.
Don, Aaron, Jeff, and Corey. I mean, I've worked with them for years on the team, in this office, in different offices, with them and against them, because even though we're all in one office together, you're still competing with the other agents in our office. We are colleagues, but also competitors at the end of the day.
Yeah, you're independent contractors.
Yeah, there's one house that everyone wants. Only one agent's going to get that. Only one client's going to get that.
Yeah. I want to say real quick, you probably have some more names, but I love Bill and Sue. So Bill's one of the nicest guys I've met. We haven't had any run-ins at all. He's just been great to work with. And what I really love about Sue is that she's a straight shooter. Like, I never have to guess, what she's thinking. And, she'll just tell it how it is.
She'll tell you in a long email.
And even when we have some back and forth, there's always a mutual respect, and I always learn something. Bill's been in the business for a long time. So very seasoned. And Don and Aaron, I love working with Don and Aaron, not just but as friends, just great people. And one thing I really love about Don and Aaron is that they have a lot of listings, and they do a really good job, I feel, of in terms of setting expectations.
Mm-hmm.
I know if it's a Don and Aaron Colvin listing, that 9 times out of 10, the house is going to be in better shape.
Yeah.
And I've asked Don, you guys must be talking with your seller. He goes, we'll look over the house and we'll say, go ahead and fix this up, or repaint, whatever, to get the house in better shape for selling. And that makes our job all that much easier. It obviously makes the house more appealing. So it's a benefit to their sellers. It's also a benefit to the people buying the house. Mm-hmm. And I did want to touch on this. So you mentioned earlier that buyers are not wanting to see big red flags in a report. And I think a lot of inspectors, actually, especially newer ones who don't have a lot of experience under their belt, they actually assume that their buyers are going to want a really detailed report that has all kinds of problems listed so that they have more negotiating power. But I found that's just not true. They'll thank me every time I give them good news. And I learned this very quickly. Like if they have a lot of testing done and the mold test all comes back normal, the water analysis is good, the septic is good, they'll say thank you so much for the good news. And the truth is, my job is no different at all. I'm no better of a person depending on the results, right? If all of that I just mentioned came back horribly bad for the same house, I did my job equally well, maybe even better, right? If I uncovered other deficiencies, but they're thankful. And I get that, it's human nature. It's hard to separate the news from the one giving it. People need to do that. They need to be mature enough and level-headed enough to say, okay, he is not the bad news he's giving me, right? It's a job to tell me, but it still happens. So
the most important thing we need to do is explain to our clients, a home inspection is not just a bunch of bad news. Don't look at it that way. If you frame it that way to your buyers or your sellers, they're going to look at it instantly and be negative. Explain to them that it's information. Some of it's good, some of it's in the middle, some of it might be bad, but it's just information that we can't change.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I wish so much. There are some agents who just make it a habit of attending inspections. Most realtors don't, and I would never expect anybody to. And some offices have policies about that, and I get that. But I do wish that they could be a fly on the wall and see, or sometimes they're three-way in on a call, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I wish they could see us, preferably in person, explaining things to clients, to know that we're not alarmists, because I mean, the more you do, it's like anything, the more your liability goes up.
Yeah.
You drive hours every day, you're more likely to get in a car accident than if you sit at home all the time. It's with us, like, the more inspections we do, the more likely we are that we're gonna tick off somebody at some point. But
You'll end up seeing me on a Saturday morning in the fall.
yeah, I found out, and people probably don't know that I know this, but I found out that we're known, among some realtor circles as Deal Kill Hill. And I thought it was kind of a cute name, actually. Like, it rhymes,
But people get stuck in their ways on that.
Yeah, I don't want to be known, obviously, as a deal killer and blacklist and all that, but it is a badge of honor in a sense. I joke with my wife, like, oh, I have to have a little decal made for that to put on my Jeep, But we have clients call and say, like, hey, my agent told me, whatever you do, don't use Hill property inspections because they're way too thorough. And they're like, okay, I'm going to call them now.
Yeah.
Like, and it's funny
That's
to me
what
that
you want if you're going to
you
spend
would never
money
do
for
that.
it.
But it's funny to me that some agents would put it that way. Like, you don't want an inspector who's like, oh, of course I do. If you want to convince somebody to not use a certain inspector, you want to say, like, they're not thorough at all. But they couldn't say that. So anyway, did you have anybody else you wanted to name? So you mentioned Bill and Sue, Don and Aaron.
Our team, really just probably my mom. She's definitely a big supporter. I mean, every post that I make on Facebook for a new listing or a closing, she's super supportive about that. She was a little shocked when I got a real estate license in the beginning because she never saw me as a salesman, but she's definitely been a huge rock of support, and she's always my biggest cheerleader. Anytime something comes out in our local newspaper or magazine or on social media that has anything to do with me, she's sharing it and just preaching to the world that I'm her son, and she's really proud of me. So
and I can tell from your posts, I see them all the time, how much you love your mom, and yeah, that's awesome.
But I think that's where I get in my posts that you'll see from a closing. At the end, I'll always thank everyone that was involved in the transaction, the home inspection team, the lender.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, by the way.
I always shout out everyone who came together to make that happen for my client on my side of the deal.
I think you're actually the only agent who we've worked with who consistently does that. There are a few who occasionally do, like maybe a quarter or half the time they'll think about putting it in there, but otherwise they don't. And the truth is, social media is so important now.
It's word of mouth.
And it's free. I mean, unless you do paid ads and things. But
if you did a good job for my client and we got them what they wanted, whether it be the negotiating power they wanted, at the end of the day, they're getting the house that they wanted, either bought or sold. I'm going to thank you when it closes, because I wouldn't have been able to close the house without your help and the mortgage lender's help and the plumber's help and the electrician's help and the title agent. I don't understand why we don't just, uplift each other.
Well, and you'll even get detailed about that. Like, if somebody goes out on a weekend, off hours, and they kind of waive a fee or that kind of thing. Like, you'll put a little note about that in there. And those details are really important to people. So, all right. If you had to pick one topic related to inspections or environmental testing that you would like to learn more about, like maybe a weak area, you seem more knowledgeable than a lot of agents, especially a lot of newer ones, but what's one area where you feel like you would like to learn more?
I had two written down here.
It could be more than one. Yeah.
The first one was asbestos. Because usually when that comes up in a conversation, it's just a very, don't touch it, which obviously you should not touch it if it's there. You need to contact a qualified professional to handle that for you, or just leave it alone. Those are your only two options. You don't want to make yourself sick or anything like that. But I don't know as much about that as I would like to know. And I'm sure I could go do some independent research, but it would be nice
I'll
to,
fill you in.
yeah, it would be nice to have a conversation with someone who already knows, because that's better than just scrolling through every article on Google to find out about it.
Yeah.
The next one is on-lot sewage, and I wrote that one down specifically for you because that Platte Drive house I mentioned earlier. You did the inspection, first house I ever sold. You uncovered that there was, you didn't phrase it this way, I came to find out later, there was an illegal tap-in to the septic tank there. That a previous owner who owned the house like decades and decades ago had tied in when the municipality was doing sewer maintenance work there. And it saved my buyer about $10,000 because we found out that information. I don't know enough about septic tanks. I've gone out with you to houses in like our Somerset County area that typically have a lot more than the Cambria County area. And we've wandered around to find a septic tank because there's nothing that sticks out to show us where the lid or anything like that is. But I would like to know a little bit more about those and just how to maintain them.
I think both are huge, gray areas for agents, especially septic. What you phrased it right, on-lot sewage, but it's a private system. So we'll start with asbestos, but the long and the short of it is, I recorded an advanced course. It's about an hour and a half long, where I spoke with a lady I know well. Her name's Jocelyn Melton. She owns Baxter Environmental Group, big company. They service PA, West Virginia, and Maryland. So very big, reputable company, but they do mold and asbestos and lead paint, abatement or encapsulation, stabilization, and they do duct cleaning. And we had a pretty lengthy discussion about asbestos, and the bottom line is asbestos is actually an amazing material. If it wasn't for mesothelioma, asbestosis, lung cancer, the big lung-related health issues that can be very painful for people who get them, it'd still be used all the time, and it actually is still being used in some products, contrary to popular belief, and even wanted in some of those. But the key thing is, if asbestos-containing materials, or ACMs for short, are friable, which means easily crushed or pulverized, for there to be a fiber release, fibers to be sent into the air and inhaled, and then those fibers can attach to the lining of somebody's lungs, and it doesn't even have to be a lot, but like anything, it tends to be the greater the exposure and over a longer period of time. So it was minors getting a lot of this, and just like black lung. And then it was their family members, I found out. Jocelyn filled me in on that. I assumed that it was going to be like contractors and renovators. She said, yeah, they're high up on the list, but it was actually the family members of these workers.
Really?
Yeah, because they have all these fibers on their clothes and on them, and they bring it home, and it's just getting carried everywhere, and they kind of, they stay suspended in the air for a while. But the two big asbestos materials that you're going to typically find in homes that we get concerned about are friable asbestos duct insulations and pipe wraps.
It's always those.
And you can contain it, you can remove it. No homeowner or DIYer should be doing that on their own. It's just, it's not safe. But there are a lot of misconceptions about it. Like older scalloped asbestos siding, or some shingles, other materials, floor tiles are a big one, 9x9 floor tiles. People think that it's a huge problem, and they're gonna die. But no, just leave it, just don't damage it. Be careful, or cover over it with like an LVP or LVT floor, or laminate, something like that. So we have that conversation with people all the time, and
they freak out about that.
Oh, I know.
Anytime that word comes up,
there are just some people they panic when they hear it, and they have like a psychosomatic issue about it, and it's like no matter what you tell them, they're gonna pay.
They're locked in that this is a serious problem, and they need $50,000 off the house.
And here's the thing, that those same people, maybe they're at a certain price point, and that means that they're only going to be able to get a home that's in this area for this age or older, right?
Where that was a much more common building material.
And it's going to likely be there somewhere. It's just like you guys give out the lead paint disclosure. You just expect that if the house is pre-78, It probably may have some, especially if it's older, probably has some lead paint. But even then, it's probably been covered over with latex or acrylic
Dozens
paint.
of times.
A ton, yeah. And then with on-lot septic, it would take a lot. We're not going to sit here and go over all the details with it, but basically, the important thing to know is that from the house to the tank, assuming it's not just an old leaching pit, that doesn't have a separate drain field, that from the house to the septic tank, it's always just what we call a lateral line that runs, with a steady downhill slope toward the tank. Everything gets separated out in the tank, and it's usually going to be one of two systems at most properties. It's either going to be a traditional gravity system where everything leaves the other side of the tank, which is called the outlet baffle. So everything separates out, solids fall to the bottom, fats, greases, oils, other materials fall to the top, and we have a sludge layer at the bottom, a scum layer at the top, gross terms. But the remaining dirty water is called effluent that leaves the outlet baffle at the other side of the tank, goes out to what's called a distribution box or a D box, and then goes to perforated pipe and just leaches down through the ground naturally. And people don't realize this is actually how things work, and it actually does a really good job of naturally cleaning all that water out. The process of bacteria breaking everything down in the tank and filtering through the layers of soil, really very effective. But if it's not that, and then most of the time, if the home's been built in the past 35, 40 years or so, or has had a new system update, it's going to usually be a mound system. So it's going to leave the other side of the mound, same way, but that dirty water then goes into a secondary tank. It goes by different names. Some people call it a holding tank, a pump chamber, a dosing, but anyway, there's a pump in there, just like you have in a sump basin, and when that water level rises up, it triggers that pump to kick on, pump that effluent uphill to the mound. And the purpose of the mound is just it's a man-made area. They're called sand mounds because sand's a main aggregate used because it's good for drainage, and everything just percolates down through the ground that way. So it just gives it more time to easily seep down. But it's funny, we actually come across more issues sometimes with mound systems because that pump's a mechanical part, and it's prone to eventual failure. But that's why every time you have a mound system, you should notice, usually inside the house, in our area, like a basement, often next to an electrical panel, there should be a tank alert. And I'll say that right on it. It's a box about yay big, and like a gray and black box, and it'll alarm, assuming it's working right and it's all wired up correctly, if there's an issue. And then people know, just don't run any water, call out the septic company, get them out right away. And more often than not, it's replacing that pump. It's not the end of the world.
Typical home maintenance for having a system like that.
I always feel really bad when we do some houses where maybe the listing agent has no clue and the seller has no clue what type of system they have. They just know that it's a private on-lot system, and we go out and maybe I'm not able to find the tank with our receiver and our flushable transmitter anywhere, and then I notice there's a hillside, oh geez, and sure enough, there's just an old terracotta or even a newer PVC line just terminating the daylight, and you look down and our transmitter's right there's toilet paper. It's above a creek, bad. I mean, we've had times where we put a little dye in for that test, but it goes a long way. And to that point, whether it is an on-lot private septic system where you're responsible for everything as the homeowner, or public sewer where in our area you're generally responsible for the lateral line that's buried between the house and the street, it's so important for people to have a sewer scope done. I tell people, even though everything we offer is important, because you don't know if you might, even in a dry, clean home, you might have a concerning mold colony issue that you can't see. Or a sky-high radon level, all kinds of stuff. But next to the general inspection, from my experience, I feel septic, the sewer scope is probably the second most important thing to get done. And it's not lender required in most cases, it is being required now by some municipalities for public systems, but whether it's public or private, really everybody should have it done. We find We find great lines, but when we do find issues, which is a good portion of the time, they can be costly. Or it can be something as simple as, like there's a little bit of root intrusion in an older clay line, and there's some what we call biofilm buildup, but pretty heavy. Like just have that hydrojetted out for a few $100, and might have to do that from time to time, but you're good to go. Like no need to replace a whole section of the pipe or the whole thing.
It's better to know. It's always better to know. That's the key to all of these inspections.
It is, and I mean, even in new builds, you'd be shocked, man. Like some of the stories I have from brand new construction.
I've seen some of your videos on them.
We did one a while back, a brand new, beautifully built home, and we go back, and so we're getting near the end. Everything looks good, and then I get my thermal camera out, and they have this big, beautiful vaulted ceiling in this great room. Giant fireplace, built-ins, whole 9 yards. And I take the thermal up, and I see just all blue on one half of the ceiling. And the client's standing right there, and he's like, "Wait, why do the ceilings look different? Why is this like orange?" And so you don't have insulation there. So it turns out, I knew right off what happened. The drywall guys got there and saw there was no insulation, but there was a disconnect somewhere, and then they went ahead and tacked it up, finished it, and hoped that the homeowner would never know.
And they wouldn't.
And then have this whole section of heat loss and decreased efficiency in a brand new, beautiful home. So they had to come back, make it right. And that's the thing. Like if it wasn't for that one tool, that thermal camera, I have no way of knowing that. So anyway, okay. Last question. This is an important one. This is why I saved it for last. But if you could tell every inspector as an agent one thing, like you may have already covered it, but if you were to share a word of advice to help us understand the agent side of things, your perspective better, and to help us grow professionally, what would it be?
The number one thing would probably be just be patient with us. Whether we are a seasoned agent, a brand new agent, somewhere in between, please have patience with us, because while you guys are there to do the inspection, and then obviously you'll answer questions for the client when everything's done, or down the road, 5 months down the road, they'll have a question for you, you'll answer. Your job is the inspection. Our job is to help them work through any issues that come up in the inspection, work through any issues that come up with their financing. So we're also tied in with the mortgage lenders. Work through any issues that come up with their title agents and everything that goes along with that. So we are just wearing so many hats. They're not as big as yours, because your hat is the main inspection hat, but we're wearing like these little mini hats for every single step of the process in buying or selling the house, that sometimes we do get overwhelmed, and we might not always be able to answer a question right away because we need to go and ask someone to get the right answer, or figure out how to phrase it, or we just need a moment to decompress because we just got the worst news in the world that actually the roof shingles are terrible, or this brand new high efficiency furnace that you think you have, no, the whole computer chip's fried, now it's not going to work, and we have to find a way to communicate that to someone. That's just the inspection piece on top of everything else that could go wrong in a transaction. So,
well, when you say to have patience with agents, in what ways exactly? Do you mean like with you getting back to us in a timely manner, or are you meaning something different?
In those moments where we do have a bit of a more harsh response, I promise it's not a personal one. Sometimes agents, certain ones, they just get really overwhelmed. I haven't been in that spot, but I've heard from agents who have, and inspectors who've dealt with agents who have, because there are agents who don't want to work with certain inspectors, and vice versa, because I know that we're not all a pleasure to work with.
Oh, look, it's funny. A couple of the agents that we have been working with a long time now and have a great relationship with and work with a lot were initially, without even knowing us, like when we first came on the scene in the area, just heard that we were the thorough company, and that maybe it would scare people, and just wrote us off. Like
Yeah.
we're not even going to mention their name. It's a couple of them that I'm thinking of. They were like adamantly opposed to anyone using us, and would yell at the buyer's agent, like, and try and demand, do not let him
You have to pick
or his
someone
team
else.
come to my
Leaving
listing.
them going in.
Yeah. So obviously not,
we will
not
get
good.
better.
But the same people, and these are older guys, but the same guys we work with now and have a great relationship with, and it's because they happen to, well, I helped them out a couple times with some things. I was probably last resort at the time, and then
They found
got
out
in a
about the
pinch,
services.
and they're like, oh my gosh, okay, he's not trying to send people running for the hills and needlessly scare them. He's being very realistic, and so yeah.
It's a lot of us, especially newer agents, who will freak out when they see their first couple of inspection reports and say, oh my God, this is 50, 73. I just looked at one the other day, 93 pages of inspection material.
And I think
a little patient with us, because as they get more experienced, they're not going to see it as the sky is falling.
Yeah, and I think that what is really important for you guys to know, and this is true of any inspector, is when, like, our goal again is not to ever kill a deal. I hate when I hear that deals fall through. I mean, there are times when, we inspect a house that is just really should be condemned, and it's like, there are things that's borderline like, should we really be required to like report this? Like, it's really bad. But we stay in our lane, and again, we're not alarmists, but if we aren't, it's so hard from our end to find that balance. Like, I feel like I've done pretty well at managing it over the years, but I could probably do this another 20, 30 years and have retired never feeling like I got this perfect. But finding the fine line is so fine between reporting, what we need to in a way that is going to make the client happy and give them all the information they need, but at the same time, not tick off, especially listing agents and sellers. Because, what you guys might not know is if we don't put, like, if we don't check, like, cosmetic defects or thin drywall cracks, letting them know it's no big deal at all, but, in most cases. But if we don't have that on there and they move in and they see it, then we get a call. And some people just don't know.
We have to be the same way I'm asking inspectors to give us patience because of everything that we're doing. We have to do the same thing for you because there are a lot of, I'll just call it what it is, hothead agents who will look through the report and get mad. Oh, well, why'd they mark this? Oh, this isn't a big deal. Oh, that's a $5 job. Why'd they put that down? Not understanding that you are held to certain rules, codes, standards, and regulations the same way that we are. And that you're not trying to destroy a deal. It's like I've referenced multiple times as we're sitting here talking. It's just information.
There's sometimes agents will call me and say, like, hey, so-and-so, client we dealt with, the buyer, usually listing agent, like, they ask for this and this and this, and, this is reasonable, but not so much this. And I'm like, well, we didn't have that in the summary of our report. It wasn't a priority defect. We went over that in person and said it's not really a big concern, but to them it may be. Well, it's been fun.
Absolutely.
I appreciate I appreciate all the insight you had to share. It's always great working with you.
Thank you.
I look forward to many more years, as long as you stay an agent.
I don't plan on going anywhere.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, you've done really well, and from a young age, and like we already talked about, doing so much for the community too. So
it's nice to get back to where I live, because I'm not just your realtor trying to get a paycheck, but I'm your neighbor that you're going to see in the grocery store, at the events downtown, out at a restaurant. So I'm going to treat you like you're my neighbor, because I don't want you to hate me when you see me in public.
Yeah, the same with us. I see people that we've inspected for all the time. I may not remember every name, but I remember the face usually. And some people we've done several. So, Anyway, all right, man.
All right.
Good seeing you again.
You too.
All right.